Good morning, Boker Tov, from here, Brazil. Good afternoon, Ahara, Tzoraim Tovim, from all of you, Eretz Israel. Before we start, let me introduce myself and begin saying that before telling you my professional life and what I'm doing, I'm a human being. And it is curious, but in all the webinars and speeches and lives that I participate, everybody begins speaking about corporate life. And I would like to begin speaking about myself as a human being. And I will urge you to do that also. First of all, I just, very happy, just a few days ago, completed my 72nd birthday. I hope I'm going to 120, as we say. I'm married to the same woman, Roberto Faldini, for 50 years. It's amazing in this nowadays. And my wife and myself, we have 3 children. Marco, that's with us today, and 2 girls, Monica and Mirella. And this team, this wonderful team, gave us 9 grandchildren, wonderful 9 grandchildren, all of them in many places of the world. 2 of Marco in Israel, 2 of my daughter Mirella in Miami, and 5 of my other daughter in Fortaleza here in Brazil. So this is my team, this is my private life. Now I'm going to speak about my professional and corporate life. I'm a businessman. I'm working as a board member of several family-owned and publicly held companies. And for many, many years, I had business relations with Israel. And for me, it's really a pleasure to be in this webinar. But the most important issue or aspect that I would like to share with you is IBGC, that I'm a co-founder of this wonderful institution that will be 25 years this November 27. So for me, it's really, really a pleasure to be mediator this webinar today with you and to share about the experience and transformation of Israel and to cope with this new, what we say, it's not a new normal, but this new abnormal situation around the world. So saying that, I'm opening today this IBGC Conecta with the theme Transformation 2020, the Israel chapter, and to associate IBGC associates and to non-associates, and will be very excited to hear today not only the first speaker, that's Marco Faldini, partner of IBI-TECH, head of international delegations to Israel, and expert in on the startup nation. Then we'll have Hadar Zofiov Hacohen, Deputy CEO of the Board of Directors of the Union in Israel, IDU. That's the IBGC from Israel. And the economist specialized in the capital markets. And Professor Ehud Menipaz, Chairman, Advisory and International Board Member. Then Semel, Chief Sustainability Officer of the Israel Institute of Energy and Environment. Before I pass the floor to all our speakers, I want to thank very much the support and partnership of IBI-TECH and our friends Shaul and Daniel that probably are listening to us, and of course IDU that are supporting and helping us in this event. Only to explain, this event is a space created to make positive connections. Therefore, your opinion is very important to all of us, to all of you that are listening to us. Send comments and questions via the chat that we have, preferably in English, to be possible to go to have the answers from our speakers, and suggestions for future transmissions and complete. Of course, at the end of this webinar, your satisfaction or ideas about what we can do better. With that, I want to thank you all and welcome to this event. And I pass the floor to Marco. That is an honor to be with my son in this webinar. Marco, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, bom dia no Brasil, צהריים טובים וגם שבת שלום לכולם פה בארץ. We are here to talk a bit about two of my legacies. The legacy of Brazil, where I was born, I was raised, I did my major, and then when I came to Israel to see what was going on over here like 4 or 5 years ago, I saw everything that was here and the innovation and the path that the country has come from well-known past with spiritualism and history and culture to a place where innovation and investment and startups can come together. So I moved to Israel. Now I'm living here. And we are in IBI-TECH, our consultancy company, receiving many people to get to know the ecosystem over here. We help them scout innovation and new business for them in Brazil. So in our consultancy firm, we are very happy to have big corporate clients in Brazil, and we are happy to have IBGC as one of our biggest clients that came to Israel last year with 100 people, plus their spouses, and was very well planned and delivered to, and also IGU, which was with us, receiving the people from Brazil. So today we're gonna talk about what is going on over here in Israel about the COVID and what has happened. I'm glad to have Eric, Hadar, and Professor Menipaz with us today. We divided the lecture in many parts. I'm gonna talk about the innovation part, and my friends over here are gonna talk about other stuff as well. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Just 1 second. And here we go. Okay. So when COVID came, there were many people that talked a lot, but I had 2 quotes here that I want to show to you. First, from the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, he said, "It's a new world of remote everything. We have seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months." And that's what we're all living in Brazil, in Israel, in all the places. Everybody is more online and more time being at home. And this led to many, many things. That's what I'm going to show you today. And there's a very well-known Israeli called Yuval Harari. Professor Harari wrote many books that are bestsellers in Israel, in New York, in all over the world, also in Brazil. And he said that we face two particularly important choices. The first is between totalitarian surveillance and citizen empowerment. And the second one is between nationalist isolation and global solidarity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those two codes today. So when COVID, that's the graph of COVID here in Israel. When it first came here, it was in the beginning of March, was at the same time that happened in Brazil. We had some cases, we had a full lockdown, which led to apparent success. We had police enforcement. We couldn't move more than 100 meters from our homes. We couldn't go to visit anyone. We couldn't go to any place. If you go to a park in front of your house, police were getting you and sending you back to your house. There were bills and everything. So it was really, really a lockdown. And then we had the reopening, kind of what is going on in Brazil right now. But that at the end led to a spike, which are seeing all over again. And we are expecting to have a second lockdown in the following days. So everybody here in Israel is taking their time to think about what they have to have at home to avoid the new times that you cannot go. We're probably going to be at home for 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks again. So it's a situation very unstable, and everybody is taking care of what they can do. And of course, the government is taking care of what they can help on business that are going to be shut and this kind of stuff. So I'm going back to the Harari's surveillance quote when he said that we had to live with the surveillance. And I'm going to show you what happened over here in Israel. So the first thing was everyone was locked down. The unemployment got really high. We had like 3 or 4% of unemployment, and we went to 20, 25% like in weeks. We have many furloughs, and the individual surveillance and app tracking from private business and also from the government hit hard. So the Shin Bet, which is like the internal secret service, start using the cameras that have all over the country that usually is used to recognize faces of potential harmers or terrorists. They started to use it to surveil, to check, to see if the people were actually not moving from place to place. And this was a bill that was placed in the Knesset, in the parliament, and it was approved. So the government got the official parliament approval to start checking if the people were moving or not. In our cell phones, we were also offered to download tracking apps that could say that if you are in one place or on the other, there was someone that had been diagnosed with COVID at the same place. So there were people that went to a restaurant and the next day, someone got ill, and on their app, they received the information. Listen, you've been to that restaurant and there was someone with COVID at the same time. So people got the information from Head Start, and they could check if their health were everything okay. We also had many companies starting to predict what was going to happen. They were just sending SMS message to our phones, and we, by answering those SMS, they could predict where the next wave were coming. So this helped a lot, and because of that, we also have the segments of the country that they know, together with the test that they're doing, if that specific city can be open or cannot be open. And one of the things that was really crazy that I heard and we saw here is that there was a voice tech startup called Vocalis that they launched a coronavirus test study by voice. So the idea was that they could hear what you're saying on your phone or calling them, and by the voice that you have, the way that you're breathing, they could predict if you're going to get ill or not. This was the craziest stuff that I heard. And in general, what happened was a very big digital transformation. So everybody came to work from home. The kids were on distance learning. The problem that the BYOD, bring your own device. Like people were before, like in Brazil right now, people were working with the company's computer. Now they're working at home with their cell phones, their iPads, their computers, and that's bring many risks in terms of cyber threats. We have seen an increase, a spike all over the world about cyber threats. We had many cases in Brazil that companies got ransom threats. They were stealing data and this kind of stuff. This is happening all over the world, and Israel, as a powerhouse on cybersecurity, is benefiting from this, unfortunately, effect of the COVID. People were eating more at home, cooking more at home, receiving more stuff at home. So the healthy food startup scene, the logistics apps that deliver stuff for people, like we also have in Brazil, they are booming. We have many companies working on the touchless technology, like in artificial intelligence, banks that don't need you to put your finger on the screen anymore, credit cards that are just by touching, you don't have to insert your PIN, this kind of stuff. And everybody, like we are right now, got to go to online meetings and conference. So I'm going to show some examples of what happened. So this is a company from Israel called Jolt that is doing training for big corporations, including Brazil, that gives the employees training in terms of a gamification. So the people think that they're like in a game, but actually they are learning stuff from the companies. So there are big international companies in Brazil using that. The surveillance tools for employees, there are some companies over here that also had a big effect. So people are working at home, they don't, the superior are not seeing the people over there anymore. So they want to online get to know if the people are working or not. One of the clients of our company has the opposite effect. He wanted to know if the employees were not working too much, because if the people are working at home and now they're working like 15 hours or 16 hours and not the usual 9 or 8 or 10, they want to know, and they want to balance the quality of life. So we had one client that wanted to check if the surveillance employee tools can help them to lower the amount of work that the people are doing at home. Checkpoint, which is a company from Israel, has received many more clients and all over the cybersecurity industry as well, because of these problems that people are using less secure networks at home. And that's the company that didn't want you to touch the screen of the computer. So you would go to the computer, no, the ATM, the screens of the bank. So if you go to a bank, some banks now ask you not to touch the screen anymore, but they transfer the touchscreen to your cell phone. So you're touching your cell phone instead of touching the screen of the ATM where everybody was there before. So these are types of things that happen here. Especially in Medtech, the transformation is really big. So we have like many companies working on stuff on Medtech, and we have a tremendous increase in investment and solutions and people looking into that. So we have the drive-through test. In Israel, you don't go to a place. You come with your car, you stop, you get the test, and then you go. And 24 hours later, you will receive on your cell phone the information, and you can print it and everything if you got the illness or not. So we have also nasal sprays to avoid COVID. We have plasma and active vaccine. It's working already here, the plasma vaccine. Some people are getting it like in a test. We have an active vaccine being tested that supposedly is going to be, if everything goes fine, like in 2 or 3 months are going to be ready. So we are hoping that our homemade vaccine would be available at the end of the year for everybody, starting the end of the year. We have many companies working on telemedicine. We have another company that delivered a fast blood sample examination. So you can just pick one drop of blood, and that machine would see a lot of test that usually takes 2-3 days. It's gonna have you like in 90 minutes or something like this. So we have, this is Olo is the machine that I'm talking about. This ecosystem health tech map are the company, more than 70 companies that was already working on COVID like 3 or 4 months, and from many fields like social and mental aspects, remote monitoring and home care, protecting and prevention, diagnostics, and decision support, and this kind of stuff. On the other side of the industry here, the defense is never stopping, and defense is going very well as it cannot stop, and actually is skyrocketing. So we had 2 launches of one satellite and another, which is actually a pharma satellite that does automatic tests in the space. So these 2 launches happened on this month, so it didn't stop. This plane, the Antonov, is the biggest plane of the world. It has been in Israel once, like many years ago, and just 1 month ago it was here. Why? It brought some big trucks from the US to Israel. So the Iron Dome system, which repels rockets from areas that are not very secure, could be installed on the American trucks, and this was being sold back to the US. And also the Iron Dome system is now being tested to use on boats. So the defense is going forward as well. In terms of investments, some things matured, some things didn't go as well. Of course, the majority of the economy is decreasing, but some things are going very well. So Lemonade, which is an insurance technology company from Israel, based in the USA, did the biggest IPO of this year so far in NASDAQ. Many companies, like I said, Checkpoint, has the best results, much better than what the analysts thought because of the COVID cyber trends. We have Pioneer as well, which is a company that are hiring like 300 people because their payment gateways are being used all over the world. What happened also is that the VCs, the venture capital, got much more cautious. So they're looking better into the situation, of course, to check where the money can go. The diminished rates of prime all over the world means there are more money available. So our crowd, which is one of the biggest venture capital over here, had the pandemic innovation conference all online. Many people came to see it, and they launched a fund to receive investment towards the vaccine and other stuff on COVID, and it was flocked. My friends over there said that it was the fastest fundraising that they did for a fund ever. So they took money from all over the world, people investing on the possibility of the vaccine and other stuff like the ecosystem that I showed before. And the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange is starting to look on startups as well, because they're saying that they are all the time they were being with real estate, finance, drilling, oil, this kind of stuff. And now they're moving to more startups as well, because that's a place where usually the IPOs from the technological companies are going to NASDAQ. And with the facility that we have on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, the possibility to have a dual listing, it makes them also interesting for the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. And to talk a bit about the diplomacy aspect of the situation is going very well. So in the beginning of the year, Israel started to export gas to Egypt. That's what this was a field that was discovered in 2010 or 11. Now it's starting to produce. And this is really important for the whole region, because in Israel, we're starting to export natural gas to Cyprus that can also send to Europe, to Jordan, to Israel, to Egypt, which is going to make the peace process with those countries that we have already much more stronger. And just lately, we have the Abraham Accord, the deal that Israel would do peace with the United Arabs, with Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And this opens an entire Arab world to the Israeli business, which was shut since ages because of the boycott that was going on officially. So this is the first country since 20 years or 30 years that is making peace with Israel, which is going to be very, very important for what is going on in the future over here. And the signs are that other countries on the region are also doing that. So the flight from Israel to the United Arab States, Emirates, was never going to happen on a straight way if Saudi Arabia wouldn't give the permanent right to do it. And Saudi Arabia was not talking to us for ages. And since 2 or 3 years, we're talking, and now they said that the flights can go over there. So with the help of the United States and the things are going on over here, there are many countries willing to talk with Israel officially and eventually coming to make peace. So the future looks good on this aspect. We're just waiting for the vaccine to get here to have everything that is being stopped, and maybe the lockdowns are going to be coming down here again to be shut off. And that's my part for today. Thanks, everyone. I just give back the word for you, Roberto.
Okay, before I go to giving the floor to Hadar, the first question I will put to you, Marco, is about this last important issue that you mentioned, the diplomatic issue that for us is really very important. This is besides everything that is mentioned about that Bibi is crazy, but he's not crazy. He's doing the best for Israel. Isn't that true?
I think that he's the best foreign guy for Israel, for sure. There are many people over here that have concerns about him, about inside stuff. But in my opinion, he's doing a great job so far.
Okay, I'm not going to discuss politics here, but in the foreign affairs, he's doing in foreign proximity to the Arab, it's wonderful, really. Okay, okay, Hadar, my dear, the floor is yours.
Hi to everyone. I will share my screen just a second. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about, the new normal in IDU, Israel Director Union. So hello, I am Hadar of Hacohen, Deputy CEO of the Israel Board Director Union. I am married, mother of 3, internal auditor and economist. Today, I will talk about the new normal at the Director Union and the change we have to embrace since COVID-19 has increased our life. Our main activities that we do as usual and the change that we made according to COVID-19. So our main activities are focused of education. We call it ongoing learning. Not only we are our seminars and training session digitally, but we are actually increased our educational activities and are now running conference and events more frequently, almost a weekly basis. At our annual Directors Members Certificated Conference, which is coordination with the Israel Security Authority, our board member received important regulatory and accounting information and update from the SEC and our certified to continue as board member for another years. We are also very proud of our digital networking meetups and mentoring program, which I will talk about it later. Our recruitment and placement unit offer our members added value as they receive access to our vast database of certified directors. In the past year, we have successfully placed 13 new directors out of 20 positions published. Our mentoring program. During the COVID-19 crisis, we developed a unique mentoring program for local industry and startups. Over 100 mentors eagerly joined the program on volunteer basis to share their expertise and support the industry and startup through this challenging time. We made a special, a unique mentoring program with the biggest bank in Israel, Bank Hapoalim, and the industry, and it's fantastic, really. And we started at the last month. Everyone love it and thankful for this. Okay, looking for the future. So technological acceleration due to COVID-19 will change the face of our future activities. Digital conference and meetups are here to stay, even post-restriction. adaptation to new normal, learning needs and trends, micro-learning, acquisition of new and broad range skills, creative adaptation to continuing change, increasingly alternative to our members. Thank you.
Okay, Hadar, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And now I would be very happy to give the floor to Professor Menipaz. Thank you. You need to put the microphone.
Yes, I just did. You just have to tell me if you can see the slides. Can you see the overhead?
Yes. No. Yes.
Yes? Okay, let me see if I can get it to be in a presentation format now. And so the title of my presentation would be The New Normal Shibboleth. But before that, I'd like to commend Marco for an excellent background that we have received about the situation in Israel in light of the COVID-19. I have to tell you that if I would have prepared this presentation about the background for today, I would not have done a better job. Thank you, Marco. I also want to be up to the challenge of Professor Faldini. He said that we should give you some family background because, as he said, we are all human beings. So maybe just some pointers. My name is Ehud Menipaz. Ehud is the name of one of the judges in the Old Testament, who was not only making the court proceedings, he also executed his judgment. And you can read it obviously in the good book. So that's my name, Ehud. My family is a 7th generation in Israel already. They moved in, last stop before they came to Israel was Beirut. They settled the upper North Galilee. They founded several very famous settlements like Mishmar Yarden, Rosh Pina, Metula, Yesod HaMa'ala. Basically, we came in as a farmer's family. I'm not a farmer, as you see, but my cousin is the president of the Israeli Farmers Association, and we have several family members that are still in the Upper Galilee, cultivating the land, every inch of it, for 130 years or so. Our family was also blessed with some very good industrialists and created 14 different industrial corporations without going into detail. And I decided that I would like to be in academia. So for many years, I've served as a full professor of aeronautical engineering, a full professor of mechanical engineering, a full professor of industrial engineering and management, and a full professor of business administration, as well as a dean, founding dean. I find this to be a very interesting occupation, the same as Professor Faldini mentioned earlier today in a private conversation. I also like to mention that I have been with the same wife for 58 years, to be exact, 52 years as a wife, 6 years as a girlfriend. I met her when she was 14, and we're still sleeping in the same bed. We also have 8 grandchildren. We've got like 3 children. I won't go into long detail, but my oldest son, Amit, was the founding CEO of eBay Israel, and was then promoted to be VP Global for eBay and moved to San Jose, California, to the headquarters on Bascom Boulevard. my daughter and her husband founded, after they had a stint in high tech, they founded James Beer Factory, which is a microbrewer with 12 or 13 outlets in Israel. And I understand that Marco likes one of the facilities in Ra'anana. My young son is a compulsive entrepreneur. He's got a holding company by the name of M51, based on Rothschild Boulevard. And he's got 11 or 12 corporations under the holding company. He did make one exit already to one of the corporations traded in here. Overall, I can say that I think the term Professor Faldini used was the team. This is my team. As to the presentation, I think that what I'd like to do in the presentation is to talk about the shibboleth. And by that I mean the phrases that we now use in light of the COVID-19. I believe that what we have to do is adopt a new vocabulary that would match whatever the environment is challenging us with. In a minute, I'll expand on that. One of the words I'd like to focus on in this shibboleth is Innovtech. In other words, innovation technology. Not high-tech, no low-tech, no mid-tech, but rather an infrastructure that makes corporations innovators. Then I'd like to talk shortly about the relevant definition of board of directors under the new normal environment. I'd like to talk a little bit about the membership of the board, some organs of the board, the roles of the board, some metrics, and then I'd like to talk about the challenges that you have in Brazil, and we also have in Israel regarding the Innovtech ecosystem. You don't know it, but I've been following Brazil since 1999 using a framework which may be useful to understand the challenges that Brazil has, along with many other countries of the world that we followed in this research. And I think that might be useful for many people that are now part of the directors, board of directors, family corporations in Brazil. So let me talk about the Innovtech, the shibboleth of the new normal. Now, there are many things I can talk about in here, but I see that right now we've got about 60 or so participants in this meeting. And I'd like to ask each one of you two questions. First, how many of you are familiar with the terms that are currently appearing at the Innovtech slide here? And secondly, how many of you have brought to the board of directors meeting the possible uses of any of those technologies in order to adjust for the new normal environment? And the list, the way it is presented in here, and it's not an all-inclusive one, includes cloud computing, both for storage and for operational uses, cyber security that was mentioned earlier today by Marco, and Israel obviously has a lot to offer, virtual reality with its derivatives, sharing of robotics or robots, what is being called cobots, the use of artificial intelligence, understanding of what's behind the terms deep learning and machine learning and the differences between the two. Have you as directors considered the implications of quantum computing and the way you may or may not use this particular technology to introduce innovation, innovative product, innovative business model in your respective corporations? Obviously, Internet of Things and big data, not only big data as a term, but big data analytics and the extensive use of statistics in order to indeed deploy big data methodologies. I'll repeat my two questions that I posed in here. Answer each one to yourself, and I'm talking to all the people that are right now in the meeting. How many of you are familiar with the terms? And second, how many of you have considered each one of them as part of the board of director minutes to adopt possible adoption of any or all of these technologies in order to help you cope with the new normal environment? All this is under the term, the shibboleth of Innovtech, short for innovation technology. Now, obviously, in this context, we have to ask ourselves how the roles of the board of directors change. What are the new tasks? Are there any new tasks in this new normal environment? So let me give you some pointers, because this in itself is a long lecture, but I'm going to make it very short. First, regarding the board membership. As of tomorrow, well, tomorrow is Shabbat, no good. As of Sunday, no, Sunday is a free day. As of Monday, this coming Monday, I want you to consider either adding or replacing directors that are currently on the board with what I like to call Innovtech directors. Now, Innovtech directors should not be necessarily 6 feet tall, or blue-eyed, or blonde. These Innovtech directors should be people that understand the digital technologies, people that represent what we call millennials. And we're very familiar with boards that have very good, respected people doing a good job on the legal side, on the accounting side, finance side. But I'm talking about people that actually live and breathe the new environment of the new normal. Those directors should perform very well under conditions of VUCA, V-U-C-A. These are acronyms for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. These are the 4 dimensions that characterize COVID-19 environment. To be exact, this term was coined by the president of my university, called Professor Warren Bennis, while I was doing my PhD. He's the one behind a very excellent book, older book, called Future Shock, that was written by Alvin Toffler. Professor Warren Bennis basically coined the VUCA conditions. I was literally in the lab while it was basically invented. And I think we now, as responsible for the new directions for directors in our respective countries, we should understand that there are things that we can do under VUCA conditions. And as I said earlier today, we should change the language, we should change the terminology, we should adopt the technologies that are just listed in on my first slide. Last point I'd like to make is regarding the board of directors design and adoption of what I call Innovtech metrics. What's Innovtech metrics? Well, this is actually a measurement of how well we do in adopting new technologies, new products, new services, new business models. As an example, how about if we appoint a director, which we would like to call Innovtech director, have him organize a subcommittee on Innovtech, and then have this particular committee adopt a metrics that says, every board meeting, we present to the board a new product, a new service, a new business model. Every board of directors meeting. Now, the frequency of these meetings could change, anywhere from a quarterly meeting, a monthly meeting, a weekly meeting. Now, you can tell me this is a brand new idea, but actually it's not. And I'd like to show you by reflecting back on my family history. some of you may be familiar with a snack food called Bamba. Marco, are you familiar with Bamba? I don't know if you like it or not,
Yes.
but I love it. Sorry?
Yes. I have it over here at home. Everybody has it.
There you go. I rest my case. The question is how this relates to the Innovtech philosophy. Well, as you may know, Bamba is basically a peanut-based snack food loved by my grandchildren, children, older people. Actually, it says this is our secret weapon in Israel to fight allergies of peanuts, because since young age kids have this Bamba product, and they say that we as a nation have the lowest rate of allergy for nuts, for peanuts, because of that. The point though is how Bamba was born.
We are having problems.
Professor, we are not hearing you.
Was, as per Osem's definition, was any chemical, physical, or change of packaging that basically can be attributing to a new SKU. Now, the empirical studies tell us that 1 out of 3,000 products introduced by a single corporation may become, quote unquote, a killing product. A product that will be a hit. Well, guess what? When Osem was about 3,000 weeks old, Bamba was offered to the board of directors, and the rest is history. In other words, you challenge the board of, as a board of directors, you challenge the corporation to have a funnel of new ideas so that there will be a new product presented or service or business model presented to the board of directors at the meeting as a metrics based on which the board of directors works. I'll let you in on another interesting insight. If you like the taste of Bamba, I'm talking about the traditional Bamba, I'm very happy to hear that because I've selected it, going back to the 1960s or so. Now I'd like to end my presentation to talk about the difficulties of applying the Innovtech as a solution to the COVID-19 and the new normal. When I followed, as I do since 1999, when I followed Brazil for a rate of innovation, which the scientific definition of which is what is the percentage of products that are being produced now that were not in existence 3 years ago in a corporation, the line that is in here, right here, the sort of orange-brown line, indicates the rate of innovation for Brazilian corporations. Look at the rate of innovation for the Israeli ecosystem. And you can see that this particular difference right here, it starts about 2012. Brazil was, well, Israel was one of the founding countries. There were only 10 founding countries. Brazil joined us only on 2012. We can see that basically there is a gap which is being maintained, sometimes smaller, sometimes larger, between the rate of innovation of Israel and Brazil. So it's a challenge. How do you basically close this gap? In any event, I'm going to suggest some solutions. The other thing I'd like to show in a way of comparison is the Innovtech ecosystem between Brazil and Israel on two other dimensions. One of them, Brazil taxes and bureaucracy, and Israeli taxes and bureaucracy. Those two graphs in here start as early as 2000 and are being traced all the way to 2018. You can see that we are very similar in the burden of taxes and the terrible bureaucracy that sometimes hampers our innovative capabilities. But there is a difference here in another important dimension. As you can see in here, the Brazil cultural and social norms versus Israel cultural and social norms. Here is a gap. This is Brazil, you know, down here, going up a little bit, going down again, up again, going down here. And this is Israel. As you can see in here, for cultural and social norms that basically celebrate innovation, I think that Marco in his presentation talked about new ideas coming in light of the COVID-19. And I wonder how many of those, for example, come up in Brazil at this time. Maybe they are. But the point is, this gap should be closed as well. So how do we then deal with these challenges? And I'm going to show you two more slides and I'm done with my presentation. Here's the Innovtech ecosystem in Brazil. The orange line represents the average for all the 50, 60 countries that we follow. Incidentally, every year we basically track down about 95% of the world gross national product and about 75% of the world population. And because of it, and since we do it at the field level, and because we don't use in any government statistics at all, the United Nations, the World Bank, the OECD, and many governments around the world listen to us. Incidentally, these presentations were made, I had a chance to present it to a forum of President Putin, of the president in Chile, president in Mexico, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan presidents, etc., etc. So the orange line basically talks about the average for the 12 dimensions that are part of the Innovtech ecosystem. The blue line are basically tracing Brazil rating. Now I'm going to go clockwise and point out to the items that need to be improved so that you can be up to the Innovtech ecosystem challenge. The physical infrastructure in Brazil should be improved. The cultural and social norms, as we've seen in the last slide, should be improved. The government policies and support and relevance are fairly good, but they should be improved. Lots to be improved in the way of taxes and bureaucracy. For government entrepreneurship programs, improvement is necessary. For entrepreneurial education at school stage, there's lots to be done to close the gap. Incidentally, as a side comment, I'm a founding director of Young Entrepreneurs Israel, a program that up till today has about 100,000 graduates. And we participate in the Juno Achievement Award around the world in the international competitions. And we basically attend to this dimension, which is entrepreneurial education at school stage successfully. Then there is entrepreneurial education at post-school stage. Professor Faldini, to your attention, we're talking about colleges and universities entrepreneurship programs. As to R&D transfer from universities, from R&D facilities, organizations into commercial state, there is a gap here which Brazil should attend to. As to commercial and legal infrastructure, including protection of IP, there is a gap. I do give you a fairly good grade in internal market dynamics. And so overall, if you ask yourself, what should be changed in order to help us become a better Innovtech ecosystem, I point out to the 11 out of 12 underlying variables. The last slide has to do with the Innovtech ecosystem in Israel. Obviously, I'd like to show you where we are. So just in a general comment, along the 12 infrastructure variables, we are relatively well on cultural and social norms vis-a-vis the world. We're fairly good in commercial and legal infrastructure, including IP protection, and fairly good in R&D transfer. Actually, the Weizmann Institute, as an example, is doing very well. I think this year alone, the commercialization account came up to about $130 million. R&D transfer is very important for the Weizmann Institute. And when Professor Faldini, you come to Israel, I'm going to take you to an unusual tour to see the original laboratory of Dr. Chaim Weizmann, our first president. The lab is very simple, but as you know, he came up with some fascinating worldwide inventions in a very simple, very modest lab. So let me summarize by saying, I claim that the new COVID-19 challenge calls for a new terminology, new set of words, what I call a shibboleth. I've pinpointed on one particular word, that's not the only word, called Innovtech, a term, innovation technology. No high-tech, mid-tech, low-tech, but infrastructure for innovation for the corporation. Then I talked about the board of directors, redefinition regarding membership, regarding organs, committees, and regarding roles of the board of directors. And then I took upon myself to show you the challenges that you, Brazil, have, and for that matter, Israel, face in order to indeed improve the Innovtech ecosystem. In a closing word, today, be it Friday, in one of the papers, main papers today, I think it's the largest distributed papers. I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to make promotion for any particular paper. There is a new article of mine that talks about the Innovtech impact, including how that jives with the new Abraham Accords that obviously reflect on the Emirates and other, hopefully, Arab countries that would come forward and join in peace with Israel. And since you mentioned the name of Bibi, I don't want to go into politics. But I can tell you that I appreciate the fact that Bibi was educated at Harvard University, was educated at MIT institution, two places I value the most around the world for higher learning. I also think he was born to the right father. His father, as you know, was a historian that researched the history of the Jewish people around the world, and specifically in Spain at the time of the Inquisition. I have to tell you that possibly upbringing is very important. And I say it in light of the fact that we have a father and son presented in our distinguished panel today, both Roberto and Marco. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Menipaz. Wonderful presentation. And it was very, very, very good to share with us your experience, your life. I want to add something that I forgot to tell you privately when you asked me what I was associated. I am also I'm associated to Endeavor. I'm a monitor to the new entrepreneur, so also doing that. Okay, I forgot to tell you. Wow.
Wait, Roberto, maybe a question. Endeavor, are you familiar with ECLA, the program that I run with my colleagues at Columbia University for entrepreneurs in South America?
No, I heard about, but I'm not familiar. Let's say like that. Okay. Okay. Well, now, Eric, it's your time with energy to illuminate ourselves. To you illuminate us. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Brazil. Shabbat shalom lekulam. First, I would like to thank, of course, the IBGC and the IDU for giving me the opportunity to give my presentation. I am Eric Semel. I am 41. I was born in Paris. My family is originated from Ra'anana. I'm from Haifa. My grandfather was one of the founders of Ra'anana, and historical family. I was born in Paris. I'm married to 2 daughters, and I came back to Israel in 2015. I've studied in Paris physics and environmental management. I have a PhD. Today, I am the Chief Sustainability Officer at the Israeli Institute of Energy and Environment. This institute is a private organization. It works with the energy and industrial field, with the biggest companies in Israel in these fields. I also have international activities. I represent the Israeli industry within the OECD business organization in several commissions like the Energy Committee and the Chemical Committee. I also represent the Israeli industry at the International Gas Union in the Strategy Committee. And I joined the IDU, the Israeli Director Union, in 2020. So I want to share my presentation. One second. Okay. So, excuse me. So I'm going to discuss today about the building of the Israeli future energy industry and transportation infrastructures. The subtitle is that it's a time for Israel to decide where to invest. So this is my, okay. So this issue, the future of Israel energy industry and transportation infrastructures, was probably one of the most popular issues discussed in the last months. It's like, you know, we are discussing all the debate on the corona because the corona is very strong in Israel today. And during this period, very surprisingly, we face a lot of debates in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, on renewable energy policy, transportation, climate change, future of industry, etc., etc. In the last months, several ministries has published plans for the future of this in these topics. Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environmental Protection, of Transportation, etc. We had also a very large OECD Israel conference on 2050 low carbon economy. And it looked like the fact that despite the dramatic corona crisis, Israel is looking forward, not just the day after, but for the coming years and decades. And all these discussions are about what will be the future of the energy in the future in Israel. And as I said, it's time to decide where to invest. So before going to the energy aspects, I want to give you an example of what has been done in Israel concerning another resource issue. Energy is a resource, but water is also a resource. And as you may know, Israel is an arid country. More than half of the country is a desert. And water was always a question in Israel, always. And a few years ago, we found the solution. And the solution is that Israel became worldwide leader in desalination. So what is desalination? We take water from the sea, we separate the salt and the water, and according to the Israeli water authorities, more than 80% of the drinking water in the country comes from the sea, more than 80%. By the way, please pay attention to the fact that it means that in Israel, water is also an energy issue. It's not disconnected because you need a lot of energy and a lot of electricity to run these desalination facilities. So now I come back to the energy issue, and the reason I'm quite optimistic for the future of the energy in Israel is the fact that we have already done our first electricity revolution. If you look at this graph, it comes from the Electricity Authorities report in 2019, last year. We see the evolution of the raw material for energy, of the primary energy. And we see on this graph that in less than 10 years, we switch from coal. The majority of the primary energy was coal, very polluting, etc., to natural gas. So in 2010, 2011, and 12, we were at 60% of coal, even more. And today, in 2018, we were at 30% of coal, 66% of natural gas, and the target for the coming few years is to go to 0% of coal and only natural gas. And what you can see here in yellow is the renewable energy that is going up. And so, of course, one of the good reasons to do this transformation is to reduce the pollution that is an issue in Israel. I guess it's an issue all over the world. So if I put you this graph, it comes from the Israeli Ministry of Environmental Protection. We see that between 2012 and today, a very, very strong decrease of the emission of pollution. It's air pollution. We can tell it for others purpose, but we can see that this policy with energy policies has a lot of benefic impact on the environment. And so now, this is for, let's say, traditional electricity production. What about the renewable energy? So if I come back a few years before, in 2012, the sun power plants were producing more or less 1% of the total electricity production. And today, in a few months, by the end of 2020, the estimation is that we will produce in Israel up to 10% of our electricity based on renewable energy. You have two pictures here. It's a thermosolar electric power plant. It is in Ashalim in the Negev. For those who are interested, I put the values, but the technical values. But the only figure I want to comment is the fact that so it's a technology where the sun, the light of the sun, is falling on mirrors, and the mirror are reflecting the energy from the sun to a water tank on the top of the tower, and it produces steam, and this steam produces electricity. And this will supply electricity for more than 100,000 of homes. So I don't know what exactly is the average population in city in Brazil, but in Israel, we have a lot of cities that are even smaller than 120,000 homes. So it's a very, very important project here in Israel. It's not just a project, it's working today. So now what is a question in terms of strategy? I've shown you that the current situation is that we produce renewable energy between 8 to 10% of the electricity mix. And the target, if you remember, I told you that we had a lot of debates in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset, plans from ministries, etc., concerning the targets for 2030, and also we're also discussing what about 2050. But the target for 2030 is 30% of renewable energy in the mix, according to the Ministry of Energy. It's 40 to 50% renewable energy in the total mix for the Ministry of Environmental Protection. Is still not fixed. But the important point is that jumping from 10% to 30% and even 50% of renewable energy in the total mix within 10 years is not trivial. It's a challenge. So I put here some strategical question. What about technological development, production, storage, distribution infrastructure, safety? For example, hydrogen, the industry of hydrogen is a good candidate for renewable energy. We know how to produce green hydrogen without CO2 emissions, etc. But it has some safety issue. Hydrogen is a hazardous material. So if you switch to 50% of the energy based on hydrogen, it's really a challenge from safety perspectives. Also, what about green transportation? etc., etc. And the solution, at least according to me, the solution that we have in Israel, and this is one of the reasons that investing in Israel is a good thing to do, is that we have two advantages. Solution is a combination of two vital advantages of Israel: a very proactive Israeli R&D and innovation policy. Professor Menipaz said a few words about it in his presentation, and a very strong and large energy industry with a very large and old experience in these questions. So if I want to come to the first key issue of these questions, the proactive Israeli R&D and innovation policy, I put here, it's a ranking from OECD, ratio of R&D compared to the GDP. It's a 2019 report. And you see here that Israel is the first country for this ratio, with South Korea, much higher than the average in OECD. And I don't put other graphs, but in other international indexes, we are also regularly in the top 10 classification. So I want to give you an example because it's very theoretical, but just to give an example of what means the innovating oriented spirit of Israel. I take the example of incubator system in order to support innovating startups. I guess that in a lot of countries, we have an incubator system. It's not, Israel is not the only country with this kind of system, but in Israel, it's special because it's a hybrid system. The one who decide where to invest, the one who select the innovating startup to develop are a private investor called the incubator. And this incubator, this private investor provides professional, technical, commercial, etc. support to the startup. So it is led from a professional point of view, but by private actors. But the one who gives the money to that, the one who brings the funding is the government, up to 85% of the R&D expenditure. And the reason is my last bullet point, that the authorities hold the investment risk when the startup is at baby stage, and the private incubator has a very high incentive to take this funding and to help and to support startups, because in case of success story, the private incubator receives up to 50% of equity. And just to put some figures on this system, in 2019, only this incubator system was supporting for 1,650 R&D projects. It represents more than $500 million provided by the Israeli authorities. And if we compare it to all the total capital raised, private and public, for R&D in high tech, it's almost 6% of this total. It is not anecdotic. So there are also other programs, etc. It is just an example, but it shows you that this incentive given by the government is really here to give incentive to private investors to invest. And I told you that the solution for the new energy revolution in Israel is a combination of two aspects: the innovating oriented spirit of Israel, but also the presence of the traditional, very strong traditional industry in Israel. Israel is relatively a small country. We are less than 9 million inhabitants. We are, not a very big country in terms of square meters, in terms of surface, but we have already several gas power plants, 2 petrochemical installations, several chemical facilities, etc., etc., etc. We have a wide pipeline net and other infrastructure for energy product distribution. And if, let's say, in the past we were distributing heavy fuel oil, today we can also distribute green hydrogen. And this heavy industry has a long experience in critical issues like production and storage infrastructure at large scale distribution and technological development. We know how to take a very young technology. We don't know if it will work. We don't know, maybe it won't work, but we know how to take it, to put in online on a production unit and to see how to take it ahead. And this is very important if you want to go to go ahead and to progress. Another example, we have the ability to produce large quantity of hydrogen from natural gas. If we want to make a revolution and go to renewable energy, we will have to store it. And a key element to store renewable energy is to transform the electricity from PV in hydrogen. It is called green hydrogen. But to do it, you have to transform all the economy from today to green hydrogen economy. And to do it, I'm not the only one to say it. It is, for example, in the German plan for a hydrogen strategy. It's also part of the European Union strategy for energy, for renewable energy. You have to go through something that is called blue hydrogen production of very large quantity of hydrogen from natural gas. And we have the industry knowing how to do it. So it's also an opportunity, of course, for heavy industry to improve its environmental efficiency. And it's not just a dream. It's not just, I'm not just talking about the future. I'm optimistic because this brings this combination between innovating spirits and innovating incentives, and on the other side, very experienced industry is already in place today. We have synergies between heavy industry and new energy sectors, and it will go ahead, it will work. And I think, of course, this will ask for a lot of investments, and I think Israel is the right place to invest. I thank you very much. I will be very happy if you have questions. Once again, thanks very much to IBGC, to Roberto, to Marco, and to IDU, to Hadar, and all the team. Shabbat Shalom. I give the floor back.
Okay, Eric, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have much time because we are going up to 10 o'clock and Brazilian time, and you have Shabbat. But it was wonderful to hear all of you, and I will dare to make one question. We have some questions, but I will have room for one question, and then the final remarks for all of you. And the question that I will dare to say is from Carlos Pacheco, that is directed to Professor Menipaz. That's, would you elaborate on physical infrastructure affecting Innovtech? If you can give some example, but I will ask you to say, to have an answer very quickly because I have short time.
So, thank you for the question. I'll be very short. When we talk about physical infrastructure, we talk about the following. We talk about telecommunication infrastructure. We talk about transportation infrastructure. We talk about real estate infrastructure. All these support what I believe is a better environment for Innovtech. Specifically, when we want to have good social network, we need to have good telecommunication network. When we want to have good access to IP, intellectual property, we need to have good access in order to get to the campuses and back to the what we call the corporate R&D facility. If you look at the Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, for example, happen to be full of what we call shared spaces for offices. Many of those are basically hubs for high-tech corporations. So back to the idea then, physical infrastructure support what I believe good Innovtech environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I have another question, and it's you could speak hours about that. As Ricardo Rochelle is asking if at the time we have a reliable vaccine on the COVID, do you believe that the scenario will return to what we used to have prior to the COVID, or everything will be different? I don't know who will be able to answer that. What will be the new and normal or normal?
I would like to say one word about it. I won't give you an answer, and the reason is simple. I'm teaching at the Haifa University, and this will be one of my questions to my students this year at the final exam. So I won't give you my answer because it would be unfair if someone is watching this presentation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's really, nobody knows, but I myself, I believe some issues will be returned, but it will be a new life. It's a new challenge. We will be used to new opportunities, and life must go on. And the normal will be not as normal as it was. But anyhow, gentlemen and lady, I would like to have one word for your final remarks. I will begin with Hadar as a woman, and then Eric and Professor Menipaz and Marco, of course. Hadar.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for all this event, and our friend watched the event also. I get some text message. They watch, they enjoy. I just want to give my opinion about all this COVID-19 and the technology. I think it's make the technology faster. So welcome. We need to look at the good things that we get from the COVID-19. This is my opinion. So I hope we will make another event even once a month from my side.
Okay, Marco will organize that. Okay.
And
Okay. Okay. Eric, please.
Yes. So my last word would be to thank IBGC and IDU. I've told it already, but it's very important. I'm very pleased to participate to this co-Brazil and Israel event. And I hope that I will meet you frontally and not just on the screen next time. Thank you very much.
Professor Menipaz.
Well, it is the second time around, I think, that I meet some of you in a meeting under the auspices of IDU and the IBGC. So I want to thank you for being good listeners and good participants. I have to tell you that by the Jewish faith, they say in order to be a good human being, you should do three things. You should read a good book. I'm sure all of you do that. You should take a good trip. You cannot do any trips now because of COVID-19. And you should make a good friend. So I think I made trips and good friends during these sessions, and I thank you and Shabbat Shalom.
Marco.
Thank you all for being here. Hadar, Professor Menipaz, Eric, it's been a real pleasure. As Professor said, we had some meetings together once. I certainly want to do this also in the future. Hopefully, we can receive our friends from Brazil here again, and we can do this all in person with good beer from maybe your family, Professor Ehud. Thank you very much. It's been a coincidence that I had the pleasure of having Mr. Faldini here to lead us. It's a good coincidence and it's a pleasure. Have a good weekend, everyone in Brazil. Shabbat Shalom here in Israel. Bye.
Okay. Closing this session, we will share the evaluation QR code on the screen, so you can evaluate and giving your opinion, because it's very important for our next meetings. And thank you, all of you, Hadar, Eric, Professor Menipaz, and my dear son Marco, to IBGC, to IDU, to IBI-TECH, and Shabbat Shalom, Chatima Tova, good year to everybody. Thank you for the audience, and see you around soon, I hope, personally, preferably. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.